In the last few weeks, since a bombshell sexual harassment and retaliation lawsuit was filed against Will Smith by a professional violinist, the actor and musician has been so quiet. Well, sorta. He's been posting a lot about his life, but has remained very tight-lipped about the allegations that he now faces. Although I will tell you, a court docket may have just given us a clue as to what's going on. Let's get into it. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Okay, let me ask you a question. If you're in the content creation game, if you're putting things out on social media, have you ever wondered how we're able to get so many of our clips out there so quickly on all these stories? We use something called Opus Clip. I'm giving you a secret. This is an all-in-one AI editor that makes it so easy to cut, create, and upload videos across any platform. Through AI, Opus Clip generates B-roll, it reframes footage, and it even cleans up audio. It is so easy. You just visit opus.pro/sidebar, you sign up, you upload, and in minutes you will have perfectly edited clips ready to go. For TikTok, Shorts, Reels, Opus Clip is your one-stop shop, and having a tool like Opus Clip means that our producers can get you viral courtroom updates instantly. This is the most powerful tool there is to share ideas and edit like a pro. So go to opus.pro/sidebar to get a free week and then 50% off. So I wanted to come back to this major lawsuit that we talked about a few weeks ago, the lawsuit against actor and rapper Will Smith. And I'm going to tell you the latest that we can see from our own findings, and then I'm going to be bringing on a celebrity attorney to get his take on what Will Smith is currently doing. Is there anything he should not be doing, should be doing? And also about the allegations in the complaint. But first, I got to talk about what Smith has been up to. So after we talked about this, after we talked about the complaint was first filed, and again, we're going to get into it, after the 57-year-old was sued by a professional violinist who appeared on Smith's tour in this bombshell sexual harassment and retaliation lawsuit, he hasn't really laid low. I mean, since the lawsuit was filed at the beginning of the month, if you go on Will Smith's Instagram, he's posting pictures and videos of trips that he took to Egypt and Botswana, appearing on Jimmy Fallon, wishing his former collaborator Jazzy Jeff a happy birthday. He's been heavily promoting his new National Geographic travel show, Pole to Pole, on Disney Plus and Hulu. But nothing about Brian King Joseph or the complaint that was filed in California State Court. Now, we did see something. So we went on the court docket, and there appear to be filings for proof of service, indicating, right, that somebody was served with a complaint in this case. It looks like the corporate defendant, and we'll talk about who that is, maybe has been served. But as far as we could tell, I didn't see definitive confirmation that Will Smith, in his individual capacity as an individual defendant, had been served. We'll talk about it a little bit more, but just something to keep in mind about how this is progressing. Now, before I get into the merits of the case and how, Will Smith may fight it, I got to quickly lay out for you what we're talking about here. So Brian King Joseph, that is the plaintiff. This is the former contestant on season 13 of America's Got Talent, has filed a lawsuit against Will Smith, and also this corporate defendant, I mentioned it before, this management company associated with Smith, Trayball Studios Management.
Earlier this year, I was hired to be a performer on a major tour with somebody who is huge in the industry. So I was excited, proud of myself for getting the opportunity. Unfortunately, some things happened, and I can't get into the details of exactly what that was because it's already a legal issue right now. But the reason why I'm speaking out about this is because getting fired or getting blamed or shamed or threatened or anything like that, simply for reporting sexual misconduct or safety threats at work, is not okay.
Now, by the way, that was a video that he posted before this lawsuit was made public. And in that video, he didn't really get into who he was talking about or the legal claims. Again, this is before the filing was made public. But I will say, in an Instagram story that was posted after the lawsuit was filed, it read, "The support means a lot, you guys. Thank you," with prayer hands and heart emojis. So what does the lawsuit claim? Well, Joseph claims that around November 2024, he was contacted by Smith's people to come out to the actor's house for an introduction for potential recording opportunity. He goes there, he plays the violin for Smith, claims that Smith invited him to join him at a performance in San Diego, and then join his tour based on a true story, the 2025 tour. And he claims that he did, in fact, play at this San Diego show, which, by the way, he seemed to post a video of on Instagram. And this is of Smith coming on stage and seemingly introducing him.
Brian King Joseph,
and in the caption, it says, "Still pinching myself, 2 sold-out nights with the one and only Will Smith at the Observatory North Park," which, by the way, is in San Diego. This is back in December of 2024. Anyway, he claims that Smith wanted him to become more involved in the performances, that he was a valued member of the team, that he provided him more stage time, he invited him to play on Smith's tracks. And this is where Joseph claims that Smith said to him, quote, "You and I have such a special connection that I don't have with anyone else." And that apparently Smith made comments to that effect. Keep that in mind. So Joseph claims that in reliance, right, on going on this upcoming multi-month tour, he told Smith's people, look, I'm going to be buying all this music equipment, I'm going to be buying medication, other things, so he's shelling out a lot of money in reliance on coming on this tour. You fast forward to March of 2025. This is where Joseph claims that he joined Will Smith for the Las Vegas part of the tour, and that all the hotel rooms for him and the crew, they were booked by the defendants, and that no one besides the crew or hotel staff had access to his room. And this is when he claims that he believes someone came into his room on March 20th without his permission or without him knowing, and that hotel security say there were no signs of forced entry. The only people, according to him, who would have been in there were supposedly Smith's management team. Now, how does he know that somebody was in his room? The complaint reads, quote, "The evidence included a handwritten note addressed to plaintiff by name, which read, 'Brian, I'll be back no later 5:30, just us,' and then a drawn heart, stone F. Among the remaining belongings were wipes, a beer bottle, a red backpack, a bottle of HIV medication with another individual's name, an earring, and hospital discharge paperwork belonging to a person unbeknownst to plaintiff. Plaintiff feared that an unknown individual would soon return to his room to engage in sexual acts with plaintiff." So Joseph claims that he immediately notified security and Smith's representatives about what had happened, that he, quote, "obtained photo documentation, changed rooms, called the non-emergency police line as well. And then after all that, this is the main argument of his complaint, he claims he was then blamed and that he was let go of this tour by the tour manager, Tim Miller. And it says, quote, "When plaintiff requested for further reasoning, Tim Miller, acting on behalf of defendants, redirected the blame for the termination onto plaintiff, saying, 'I don't know, you tell me, because everyone is telling me that what happened to you is a lie, nothing happened, and you made the whole thing up, so tell me, why did you lie and make this up?'" Now, in the complaint, Joseph alleges that he was shocked by this accusation and that he submitted evidence and a timeline, but, quote, "Defendant never made any effort to verify if the safety concern was true or not. One call to the hotel security would have been sufficient. Instead, defendant was intent on firing plaintiff because he reported the attempted sexual assault." Miller also indicated in person and via email that the tour was, quote, "moving in a different direction," which was part of the reason for plaintiff's termination. However, following plaintiff's report and termination, defendant hired another violinist to assume the same position on the tour. This hiring strongly suggested that defendant's stated reason for the termination was pretextual. And from there, the complaint reads, plaintiff further pleads on information and belief. The defendant's conduct goes beyond a mere failure to protect an employee's safety or a dispute over a claim. The facts strongly suggest that defendant Willard Carroll Smith II was deliberately grooming and priming Mr. Joseph for further sexual exploitation. The sequence of events, Smith's prior statements to plaintiff, and the circumstances of the hotel intrusion all point to a pattern of predatory behavior rather than an isolated incident. Defendant's actions caused plaintiff severe emotional distress, economic loss, reputational harm, and other damages. Plaintiff was also harmed as a result of the stress of losing his job. His health deteriorated, causing major physiological damage. Plaintiff suffered from PTSD and other mental illness as a result of the termination. And he is suing for multiple claims and causes of action here: retaliation under California law, retaliation under the labor code, retaliatory termination in violation of public policy. Basically here, that you're fired for reporting sexual harassment or workplace safety, that this is protected activity. There's also a Bain Act violation claim. This is a right to sue if you believe that your rights under the Constitution or California law have been interfered with, and that the defendants, this is what is claimed here, threatened, intimidated, and or coerced plaintiff by terminating him and falsely saying they were just moving in a different direction and replaced him. There is a Ralph Act violation claim. So this is where it protects people from violence or threats because of sex or sexual orientation. The claim here is the alleged intrusion into his room was a violent act or threat or intimidation of a sexual nature. Quote, "The circumstances, including the personal nature of the items left behind, the note addressed to plaintiff, and prior statements by Smith to plaintiff, such as 'you and I have such a special connection,' support the inference that plaintiff believed that the substantial motivating reason for the unlawful entry and related conduct was plaintiff's sex and or sexual orientation." There's also a claim for sexual harassment in violation of the California Fair Employment and Housing Act, which essentially protects employees from harassment or discrimination. It goes on to say that the government code makes it illegal for an employer or any other person because of sex to harass an employee. Further states, an employer may also be responsible for the acts of non-employees with respect to harassment of employees. And here, Joseph claims that he was employed by the defendants, that he was working out of California for preparing for the tour. So that's why California law violation and California jurisdiction, that someone broke into his room while on tour for the defendants, so course of employment, and that a note was left with the intent to engage in sex acts, a note left in his hotel room, a room that was assigned and arranged for by his employers, the defendants, and that they didn't do anything about it after Joseph reported it, and then he was fired for it. So throughout the complaint, Joseph discusses the harm that he suffered and the damages, and I went through that as well. Now, before I bring on Imran Ansari, celebrity defense attorney, to talk about this, we actually sat down with Brian Joseph's attorney, Jonathan Delshad, in our previous episode of Sidebar. Here is part of what he had to say when I asked him to explain to me how this really connects back to Will Smith.
I don't want to get ahead of my skis here because, again, we haven't done discovery. We don't know what the facts are going to bear out. But again, the allegations here so far, I think the main allegations in our complaint are that it's some type of retaliation for reporting sexual harassment. So that's the main thrust of the arguments here. Again, what was written on the note that was allegedly written on the note. Everything I'm going to say is allegedly because it's all based off of the complaint, information, and belief at this point in time. You're spot on, by the way. That's the critical question in tying it back, meaning can we tie that back to Will Smith? But I think that there's a second option as well. That's just for the sexual harassment part of it. For the reporting, clearly it got back to Will Smith. I mean, that the reporting was reported to the tour manager, the right-hand man.
Is that Tim Miller, by the way? Is that Tim Miller?
Tim Miller.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that, that's, I assume you're not asking about the retaliation for the reporting. I'm assuming you're asking about, did he know that was in there? And then the question becomes, why is he retaliating for reporting? And that's the critical question here.
I just want to go back to Will Smith for a second. And correct me if I'm wrong, but there was one comment that was listed in the complaint, and this is an overarching claim of sexual harassment. To be clear, is your client alleging that Will Smith ever sexually harassed him or propositioned him in any way?
I don't think that's not the claim that's being made in our complaint right now.
100%. But the comment that Will Smith allegedly made to him was put there for a reason. No, it was that comment that he allegedly made. And I believe there was even a reference to other unidentified comments that would give him rise to believe that whatever was left in his hotel room went to this claim of sexual harassment in a way.
I think that remains to be seen. I don't want to get ahead of my skis on that. Those are facts that are going to come out in discovery. And you're asking me to kind of hypothesize on what may have happened in this case. And again, as an attorney, our job is to advocate for our clients, to figure out the facts. At this point, the only side of the story I know is from what my client tells me.
Sure.
We want to do the discovery. We want to get into the weeds of this case. We want to figure out exactly what happened, who was involved in this. And, there's ways that we can figure that stuff out.
Now, I'm also going to tell you that Smith's attorney, Alan B. Grodsky, said at the time of this lawsuit being filed, quote, Mr. Joseph's allegations concerning my client are false, baseless, and reckless. They are categorically denied, and we will use all legal means available to address these claims and to ensure that the truth is brought to light. All right, so now I want to bring on acclaimed attorney, litigator to the stars, celebrity attorney Imran Ansari. He's represented L.A. Reid, 50 Cent, Harvey Weinstein, Russell Simmons. Thank you so much for coming on, Imran. It's been a minute. It's good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jesse.
First, let me start with what Will Smith has been doing since the lawsuit was filed. I mentioned this at the beginning. He's been very active on social media. He's been promoting his new show. He's been traveling, posting photos with family. Very silent on the case. I'm not surprised by that. Hasn't made any mention of it. But for somebody who has been hit with a bombshell lawsuit like this, very public lawsuit like this, what do you make of him being so public and just living out his life?
Yeah, Jesse, listen, if he was my client, And he was looking for advice of, how do I react to this on a PR aspect, on the public aspect? I'll probably tell him, like, listen, Will, you just want to be silent, go about your business, really put on a public image that this doesn't bother you because you have nothing to fear, right? That these are allegations that we are going to fight in court. We're going to defend against and possibly even knock out before it gets to discovery with a motion to dismiss. So that would be some of the advice I would be giving Will Smith at this point. And likely he got his advice from his attorney, and he's just going about business as usual when he has these other things happening in his career.
And do you think it's also because of the actual allegations he's facing? Somebody would look at the headlines and be like, oh my gosh, what did Will Smith do? But when you read through it, and I talked about it with the attorney who's representing the plaintiff in this case, it's not like necessarily Will Smith is accused of sexually assaulting or harassing the plaintiff and a quid pro quo scheme or anything like we've seen in recent history. I'll be straight up, I kind of questioned the attorney about it. I was like, show me the connective tissue back to Will Smith. And I gotta tell you, it didn't feel that clear. I mean, I get it. I understand it from a legal point of view. I understand it. But I think from an everyday observer, they might not be able to make that connection per se. And I wonder if that's the case. Maybe you see it, I see it the wrong way, but I also wonder if that might be dictating why Will Smith is just living out his life.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Jesse. And, in preparation and coming on with you, I went back and I saw and I viewed your interview with that attorney. And I love that you used the connective tissue reference again, because I enjoyed that in your interview with him. And that's that, right? There's a connection. So they place Will Smith in this complaint. It's going to have that sort of shock value. It's going to be, something that they could put out there in terms of the publicity around the complaint. But ultimately in court, are you going to be able to prove any real wrongdoing by Will Smith? And importantly, Jesse, that connective tissue, are you going to be able to connect Will Smith and his alleged actions, and it's sort of thin here in that complaint, with any harm that this plaintiff actually experienced because of his allegations, right? So I don't think they're going to get there. This is my opinion, Jesse. I'm reading that complaint. I see the allegation against Will Smith as an individual, that comment that he made allegedly about having a connection. But I don't know, and I don't think, again, my opinion, that rises to the level of any liability. And in your interview with,
because the counter would be, it's Will Smith. Everybody's working for him. He's in charge of this tour. He allegedly made a comment that could be taken either way. They seem to be suggesting it's one of many comments. And Joseph gets fired, and he believes he wasn't fired really because of any reason other than he reported this alleged instance of sexual harassment, potential sexual assault, because they hired another violinist, and that Will Smith had to have known about this, that Will Smith was behind it, and they couple it with the, potentially odd comments that he made. That, again, is how they're connecting it.
Yeah, well, listen, I don't think that really is going to pass muster in court. It's early, it remains to be seen. But if you're going to file a complaint and allege individual liability like they have against Will Smith, they have that one comment, which arguably could have been completely innocuous, nothing sexually charged, just something like, all right, you're coming on this tour, you're going to be playing music, and I feel like I have a connection with you. He may have said that with other musicians in the past, but what is the liability against Will Smith? If you're going to have these comments and you allege and reference other comments, but you don't put that in the complaint, that raises question marks. But the connection, right? Like for individual liability here, I don't think that they're going to be able to show that. And when I listened to the interview with the attorney, he talked about upon information and belief, and of course all these things that may be beefed up during this discovery, but you have to pass go to get there. And I expect that we would see a motion to dismiss coming out from the defendant's camp against this particular complaint, especially against the allegations and bringing in Will Smith as an individual.
That's a good point, and I want to be clear about that. So you don't have to include everything in your initial complaint, but it has to meet a certain threshold for the lawsuit to keep on going, right? That was something that I seemed to try to be asking him, and he's like, we'll learn more about this during the course of discovery. Did you feel that the complaint was relatively bare bones at this point against either of the defendants?
Yeah, Jesse, I personally think so, right? Because, and you have all those causes of action under the California law, statutory law regarding retaliation. And there's the allegation there, right? And of course, a pleading, complaint in the civil arena, you just have to make out the allegations enough to get into the courtroom. But there are certain aspects of claims like this that I think on this particular complaint, especially against Will Smith individually, that this individual, the plaintiff, may have a difficult time having that claim survive based on solely what we see in this complaint. Of course, then you go into discovery, but if I was in the defense camp, I would certainly be mulling over a motion to dismiss based on the sufficiency of that complaint and whether it really makes out a allegation, proximate cause of harm leading back to Will Smith individually. Now, the corporation's another thing, if he's going to be able to allege retaliatory firing, but I expect that they're going to come in with their defense, and we really don't know what the defense standpoint is at this point from a firing standpoint or retaliation standpoint. And I'm sure they're going to say, listen, there was other reasons to terminate this individual, and it was not pretextual.
If he can prove that he goes into his room and there's a note there and it's got all that stuff there and he didn't do it and it wasn't like somebody he knew was in there and he just walks in, if he can prove that, if he's got the note, if he has surveillance footage, if he has reports that he, to hotel security and police, if he can prove that aspect of the case, how much does that change everything?
So if he's able to prove that, and again, you can't be speculative in any of this, right? You have to really have concrete evidence and then link it back to some sort of theory of liability, Jesse, against these defendants. If he's able to show that, I still have that question, right? And again, I don't mean to be piling on the plaintiff here. I'm just analyzing this from what I see in the complaint there. I still think that there's going to be a difficult time tagging the defendants with any sort of liability because of what happened allegedly in the hotel room with the note and the items being left there and the suggested sort of comments in that note. But did the defendants know or should have known that something like this would happen? Did they have a duty somehow to safeguard that hotel room? And is there any connection whatsoever? Let's say an individual went into the hotel room and did that. Is there any connection whatsoever between that individual and the defendants named in this case? Maybe they're going to be able to prove that and bring out evidence. But from the complaint, I still feel like those dots, there's a line that needs to be connected that's not there.
Is it illegal for him to be fired because he reported this? Is it illegal? Because they could make the argument, yeah, we went with somebody else. I mean, what he seems to be relying on is the fact that they didn't, they hired another violinist, according to him. And I wonder, if he can really show that I was fired. I mean, the timing of this, guys, I'm fired right after I report this. You put two and two together. Talk to me about that.
Sure. If he is able to prove, right, that there was a retaliatory termination, that he went forward with these allegations, that he said that he felt unsafe, that he felt that there was some sort of sexual harassment that was in existence here, and that complaint was the basis of his termination. If he's able to connect those dots and lead it back to the defendants, then certainly he may have a case for retaliation, right? And when you look at this complaint and when you interviewed the attorney, right, he was actually suggesting that this is not a sexual harassment claim per se against Will Smith, right? And that's important to note, right? It's really a retaliatory firing case at the heart, the meat and potatoes of this case. And if he's able to show that there was some sort of retaliation for him speaking out about this, then he may have a case, an arguable case against the defendants. But I am sure that there's going to be another side to this story, and we're going to perhaps wait to see the motions that are being filed or may be filed in response to this complaint, or certainly during discovery if it passes the pleading stage.
I want to go back to something I mentioned at the top of the show. We looked through the court documents. I could be wrong, but it appears there's proof of service filings with respect to the management company that's been named as a defendant. We couldn't necessarily see it with respect to Will Smith. Would that mean that he hasn't been served with the complaint? And is that unusual if that's the case?
So, Jesse, what I would, just based on what you're telling me now, I would imagine, and we have a comment, right? We have a statement from his attorney that his attorney accepted service on behalf of Will Smith of the complaint. And that way there's no fanfare with some, a process server if they can't get to Will Smith's house because of gates or he's not there, that there's a process server waiting in ambush for Will Smith at some public event to serve him with that complaint and papers, which of course is very, dramatic. And typically when you have a public figure as a client, a celebrity, and you know at some point they're going to be able to serve your client with a complaint, you'll reach out to the other side. You'll say, listen, I'll accept service on behalf of my client. We don't have to have any sort of public service, or any issue, or you don't have to ambush him on a red carpet with the complaint. I'll accept service, and let's talk about a reasonable time to respond to this complaint. So I would imagine that's what's happened here. They've served the corporate entity, but Will Smith, his attorney, most likely, again, I'm speculating, but most likely reached out to the plaintiff's attorneys. I'll take service. It's time to respond.
If this progresses, so if it survives a motion to dismiss, it goes forward, if this is based on these allegations, if Will Smith were to settle, would people view that as an admission of guilt?
That's really tricky, Jesse. When you have these sort of cases, with someone who is a public figure, a celebrity, someone who is in the public eye. When you settle a case, if it's a decision to settle the case, sometimes the public will look at that as some sort of admission of liability. Some people who don't understand the difference between the civil and criminal stuff will say, oh, he's guilty. He must be guilty. He settled the case. But Jesse, that's not always the case, right? There's sometimes a business decision being made on a defendant's side saying, am I going to go through the expense, time, and arduous process of trying this case against this individual? Or am I going to say, listen, I just want this, I deny the claim. I think the claim is BS, and I just want to move on with my life and my business, all right? In those circumstances, there's sometimes behind the closed doors, attorneys are talking, and a settlement is had. Sometimes there's not even money exchanged in these settlements, and there are statements that are put out there. But you can't just assume always that the person who is settling the case is automatically at fault or admitting wrongdoing, because sometimes, especially with these celebrities and public figures, they'd rather not have the scrutiny of litigation and discovery into not just the claims that this person is making, but even potentially in other areas of their life. And they'll rather just resolve the case and move on.
Imran, I'm sorry. Let's see where this goes. Love to continue the conversation as this case potentially progresses, but really appreciate you taking the time. Don't be a stranger. You're so busy. You never come on Sidebar anymore. I hate it. It's not nice. It's not nice. You forget all about us, Imran.
Let me know. I'm always going to be make time for you, man.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can also follow us, by the way, on NBC's Peacock. We got Sidebar episodes there. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, you can follow my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live. I'll see you next time, everybody.